Looking back now, I realize I should have noticed the cracks much earlier. It's easy to say that in hindsight, when the whole story has already unraveled, when the pieces are scattered on the floor, and you can finally see how they never truly fit together in the first place. At the time, though, I was blinded by hope, by love, by that dangerous need to believe you've finally found the person who makes sense of your chaos. That's what Claire was for me. She was my sense of order, or at least that's how it felt when I first met her. I was 31 when she walked into my life, too old to be naive, too young to be wise. I had just clawed my way out of a broken engagement, still raw, still licking the wounds of promises that had turned into ashes. My friends told me to take time, to stay single, to rebuild myself before letting anyone close again. I ignored them. When Claire laughed at something I said at that small bar downtown, the kind of laugh that makes heads turn, I felt like someone had lifted a weight off my chest. She wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic. You know the type, the kind of woman who carries storms in her eyes but smiles like she's the cure to them. We started seeing each other almost immediately. At first, it was thrilling. Nights filled with long drives, wine-soaked conversations, secrets whispered under the cover of darkness. She made me feel alive in ways I hadn't in years. But even then, if I'm honest, there were moments, fleeting ones, when I sensed something underneath her charm. A hesitation in her gaze, a shadow behind her smile. It was as if she carried an invisible burden, one she wasn't ready to share. I told myself not to pry. People have pasts and not every scar needs explaining. At least that's what I thought. But one evening after we had been seeing each other for a few months, I noticed something that planted the first seed of doubt in me. We were at her apartment, sitting on the couch when her phone buzzed. She reached for it instinctively, but when she saw the screen, she hesitated. For a fraction of a second, her expression shifted, panic, then calculation. Then she smiled, slid the phone face down on the coffee table and said, "It's nothing, just work." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But her voice was just a little too light, her movements a little too deliberate. It was like watching someone rehearse lines for a play, trying to make them sound natural. I let it go, of course. What else could I do? Trust is fragile at the start of any relationship, and I wasn't about to shatter it by demanding explanations I had no right to. Still, the moment stayed with me. Days later, I found myself wondering about that message, about who might have sent it. Was it really just work? Or was there someone else orbiting her life, someone she didn't want me to know about? These questions gnawed at me quietly, and though I tried to push them aside, they never fully left. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, close to midnight. I had been restless all evening, unable to focus, so I decided to surprise her. I picked up a bottle of her favorite wine, the kind she always said reminded her of summers in Italy, and drove to her place. I didn't call ahead. I thought it would be romantic, a small gesture to show her I was thinking of her. When I arrived, the lights were on. From the street, I could see her silhouette moving through the apartment, packing. I smiled, imagining her delight when she saw me standing at her door with the wine. But then, as I raised my hand to knock, I heard it, her voice. She was on the phone. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then I caught the tone, soft and intimate, the way people only speak when they're talking to someone who matters deeply. I froze, wine bottle still clutched in my hand, and listened. "I miss you too," she whispered. My stomach dropped. There was a pause, then she laughed softly, the kind of laugh she had once reserved for me. "Don't worry, he doesn't suspect anything." My hand went numb around the bottle. I couldn't breathe. In that moment, the world tilted, and I felt like I was standing outside my own life, watching it crumble. I left without knocking, without saying a word. I drove aimlessly through the city until the bottle of wine rolled off the passenger seat and shattered on the floor of my car. That sound, the glass breaking, felt like the perfect echo of what had just happened inside me. The next morning when Claire called, I didn't answer. I couldn't. I didn't know what to say, how to confront her, whether I even wanted to hear her explanations. But the silence between us didn't last. She showed up at my door 2 days later, smiling like nothing was wrong, holding a bag of pastries from my favorite bakery. And I, like the fool I was, let her in. When I opened the door that morning and saw Claire standing there, I wanted to slam it shut in her face. My heart was still raw from what I had overheard, still aching with every echo of her voice whispering into the phone. But she was radiant in a way that made resistance difficult, hair tied back casually, a mischievous sparkle in her eyes, holding that little white paper bag of pastries like it was a peace offering from a war she didn't even know she'd started. "Good morning," she said, her tone light, almost rehearsed. "I thought you might need something sweet to start the day." I stood there for a long beat, torn between anger and longing. She didn't look guilty. If anything, she looked disarmingly normal, like any other day we had spent together. And that somehow was worse. Did she not care that I was pulling away? Did she assume I was too blind, too desperate to notice the cracks forming between us? Still, I stepped aside and let her in. Weakness, that's what it was. Love makes cowards of us all, and I was no exception. She moved through my apartment as if it was her own, setting the pastries on the kitchen counter, humming softly under her breath. I watched her, trying to reconcile the woman before me with the voice I had heard days earlier. We sat at the table, the smell of coffee and warm croissants filling the room. She smiled at me across the table, tore off a piece of pastry, and asked about my work, as if nothing had changed, as if she hadn't whispered another man's name in the dark. I couldn't take it. "Who were you talking to the other night?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Her hand froze halfway to her mouth. Just for a second her mask slipped. Panic flashed in her eyes, so quick I might have missed it if I wasn't searching for it. Then she smiled, setting the pastry down. "My sister," she said easily. "She's going through a rough patch. She calls me late sometimes." It was too smooth, too convenient. I wanted to believe it, but I couldn't. The tone I had heard, the intimacy in her voice, that wasn't how people spoke to their sisters. And yet, when she reached across the table and took my hand, pressing her fingers against mine, I felt my resolve weaken. "You don't trust me," she said softly, almost sadly. "Do you?" I didn't answer. My silence was enough. She let go of my hand and leaned back, her expression unreadable. For a moment the room felt heavy with something unspoken, something dangerous. Then she smiled again, as if wiping the slate clean. That became our pattern over the next few weeks, me catching glimpses of shadows I couldn't name, her covering them with effortless lies that sounded almost like truths. I'd find her phone buzzing in the middle of the night, and she'd silence it with a casual shrug. I'd notice the way she disappeared for hours without explanation, only to return with stories that sounded rehearsed. Each time, I told myself I was imagining things, that my broken engagement had left me paranoid, suspicious. But the truth was, I wasn't imagining it. The truth was sitting right there in front of me, night after night, laughing at my jokes, kissing me with lips that still tasted like secrets. One evening we went to a friend's birthday party together. Everything seemed fine, almost perfect. She was dazzling, charming everyone, her hand resting lightly on mine as if to remind me we belonged together. But then, in the middle of a crowded room, I saw it, the slip. She excused herself to take a call, stepping out onto the balcony. I followed a few minutes later, pretending I needed fresh air. She didn't see me. She was facing the city, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and urgent. "I can't keep this up," she said. "He's starting to notice." My stomach twisted. Whoever was on the other end must have said something that calmed her, because she laughed softly and whispered, "I love you too." The words cut through me like glass. I turned away before she could see me, forcing myself back into the party, plastering on a smile I didn't feel. Inside, I was crumbling, but I knew one thing. I couldn't confront her without proof. She was too good at twisting words, too good at making me doubt myself. I needed something undeniable, something she couldn't explain away with a smile and a gentle squeeze of my hand. So I started watching, waiting, listening. I became someone I didn't recognize, a man checking her phone when she wasn't looking, a man memorizing the times she disappeared, a man who drove past her apartment late at night just to see if the lights were on. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. I needed the truth, even if it destroyed me. And then one night I got it. She had left her phone on the counter while she showered. A message popped up on the screen, the preview impossible to ignore. I can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect, yours always. My hands shook as I unlocked the phone. The thread of messages was long, stretching back months. Promises, secrets, desires. None of them meant for me. I stood there staring at the evidence, my chest tight, my vision blurring. I felt like I was drowning, like the air had been stolen from the room. She wasn't just lying, she was living another life entirely. When she came out of the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, humming as if nothing in the world was wrong, I knew this was the moment. The moment everything would come crashing down. But instead of confronting her, I slipped the phone back onto the counter and forced a smile. Because if she had betrayed me this deeply, then I wasn't going to just walk away. No, I needed to know everything. And I needed her to tell me herself. I carried the weight of those messages like a stone lodged in my chest. Every time she looked at me, every time she brushed her fingers against mine, I felt the lie burn deeper into my skin. I wanted to scream at her, to throw the phone down on the table and demand answers, but some darker instinct held me back. If she had the courage to whisper, "I love you," into someone else's ear while lying beside me at night, then I had to be smarter. She was playing a game, and I needed to understand the rules before I dared move a piece. So I began to mirror her. If she could pretend, so could I. I laughed when she laughed, touched her when she touched me, and kept my voice steady while my mind raced. At work I became distracted, jittery, my colleagues asking if I was sleeping at all. I was. Most nights I lay awake, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing beside me, wondering if she was dreaming of him. And yet, despite the betrayal festering inside me, I still loved her. That was the sickest part of it. Love doesn't evaporate when it's poisoned. It clings, stubborn, even when it's killing you. I found myself desperate for her affection, clinging to the scraps she offered, even as I knew they were tainted. One night I decided to follow her. She had told me she was going to visit her sister again, a story I already knew was a lie. I watched from a distance as she climbed into a taxi, pulling her coat tight around her. I hailed another cab and told the driver to follow. We wound through the city until we stopped in front of a restaurant I'd never been to. She stepped out, glanced around, and walked inside. I waited a few minutes before getting out and slipping into the shadows across the street. Through the window, I saw her. She wasn't with her sister. She was with him. He was older than me, though not by much. Well-dressed, confident, with that polished air of a man who has always gotten what he wanted. She leaned toward him, laughing, her eyes glowing in a way they hadn't when she looked at me for weeks. And then, without hesitation, she reached across the table and touched his hand, her fingers lingering like a promise. My throat went dry. My fists clenched so tightly that my nails cut into my palms. Watching her give away what I thought belonged to me, it hollowed me out. I should have walked in right then, shattered their little world with the truth, but I didn't. Instead, I turned away and left. The image of them burned into my mind like a scar I'd never erase. That night she came home late, smelling faintly of wine and perfume. She slipped into bed beside me, pressing her body against mine as if nothing had happened. I lay stiff, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she could feel the tension radiating from me. But she didn't say a word. She fell asleep quickly, as though guilt had no hold on her. I thought I'd reached my breaking point, but the truth is, I was still shackled by hope. A foolish part of me believed she might choose me in the end, that she might realize what we had was worth more than whatever fleeting thrill she found in his arms. That hope kept me silent, even as it destroyed me. But fate has a way of stripping illusions when you least expect it. A week later, she asked me to meet her at a quiet cafe. I thought, foolishly, that maybe she was ready to confess, ready to tell me the truth on her own terms. I sat across from her, heart pounding, waiting for the words. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped box. "I saw this and thought of you," she said, sliding it across the table. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a watch, sleek and expensive, far beyond what she could usually afford. I looked at her, confused. "I wanted you to have something beautiful," she said, smiling softly. But I wasn't listening. All I could think of was where the money had come from, or worse, who had chosen it with her. That's when I realized it. She wasn't going to confess. Not ever. She was going to bury me in lies and gifts until I either stopped asking questions or broke apart entirely. Something inside me shifted then. The love, the desperation, it didn't vanish, but it twisted into something sharper. I didn't just want the truth anymore. I wanted to make her face it. So I started planning. I kept my calm around her, kept the charade alive. But when she wasn't looking, I gathered every shred of evidence I could, screenshots of messages, dates and times of her disappearances, even photographs of her with him outside that restaurant. I became meticulous, obsessive, cataloging her betrayal like a man assembling a case for trial. And still, every night, she kissed me goodnight as though nothing were wrong. One evening, as she drifted to sleep, she murmured his name. Not mine. His. My chest tightened, rage and heartbreak colliding until I thought I'd suffocate. I stared at her in the dark, her face peaceful, innocent, as if she hadn't just pierced me with the deepest wound yet. That was when I knew. The confrontation wasn't just inevitable, it was necessary. And when it came, it wouldn't be quiet. The night I finally decided to confront her, the city was drenched in rain. The kind that makes the streets glisten under neon lights and turns every shadow into a secret. I sat in the kitchen, a glass of whiskey untouched in front of me, the folder of evidence spread out on the table like a crime scene. Her betrayal had become my obsession, and now it was laid bare in black and white. Screenshots, photos, receipts. Proof enough to strip her down to the truth she'd been running from. When she came home, her coat damp from the storm, she smiled faintly at me, the same practiced smile that had fooled me for months. But I didn't smile back. I gestured toward the chair opposite mine. "Sit," I said. Something in my tone made her pause. She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself into the chair. Her eyes flicked toward the papers on the table, and I saw it, the brief flash of panic she couldn't hide. "What's all this?" she asked, her voice too calm, too measured. I slid a photo across the table, the one of her with him outside the restaurant. Her hand froze halfway to her lap. "You want to explain this to me?" I asked. My voice was steady, but inside my pulse hammered like a drum. She stared at the photo, then at me, her lips parting as though words were fighting to come out. But she said nothing. So I pressed on. "The messages, the lies about your sister, the nights you said you were working late." I tapped the stack of evidence. "It's all here." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she exhaled and leaned back in her chair, her expression hardening. "You went through my things," she said flatly. "That broke something in me. That's what you're worried about, that I found out, not that you've been tearing our life apart behind my back." Her jaw clenched, but still she didn't answer. She just sat there, her eyes darting toward the window, as if searching for an escape. "Say something," I demanded. My voice cracked, the weight of months of suspicion and pain breaking through. At last she whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen." The words sliced through me. Not a denial, not an apology, just a weak confession that tasted like cowardice. "Didn't mean for what to happen?" I asked bitterly. "For you to fall into his bed, for you to whisper love to him while lying next to me." Her face crumpled then, but no tears came. She was too composed, too guarded, and that made it worse. "I was lonely," she said finally. "You were so consumed with work, with your own world. He listened to me. He made me feel seen. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing through the kitchen. I loved you. I gave you everything I had, and you threw it away for what? A man who buys you expensive watches, who tells you what you want to hear. Her composure cracked then. Her voice rose, sharp and defensive. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't plan it. But once it started, I couldn't stop. I stared at her, my chest heaving. So what now? Do you love him? The silence that followed was louder than any scream. She lowered her eyes, and that was my answer. I felt myself unravel in that moment. The anger, the sorrow, the disbelief, it all crashed together until I could barely breathe. I pushed the folder of evidence toward her. Look at it, I said hoarsely. Every lie, every betrayal, look at what you've done. She didn't. She just sat there, trembling as though if she didn't move, the truth might somehow disappear. Finally, she whispered, I never wanted to hurt you. I laughed then, a hollow, broken sound. But you did, over and over again. The storm outside raged, rain lashing against the windows. It felt like the world itself was breaking with us. After a long silence, I said, I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I don't even know if I want to try. Her eyes filled with tears at last, and she reached across the table, her hand trembling. Please, I still love you. I pulled back, the gesture cutting me deeper than her words. No, I whispered. You love him. I was just the fool who stood in the way. The look on her face then, anguish, regret, fear, it almost made me falter. Almost. But I knew what I had to do. I rose from the table, leaving the papers scattered like ashes. This is over, I said. Whatever we were, whatever we had, it's gone. Her sob broke the silence as I walked past her, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. That night I left the apartment with nothing but a bag and the sound of her crying echoing in my ears. The rain soaked me to the bone, but I welcomed it. It felt like a baptism, a cleansing, though my heart was still heavy with poison. I thought walking away would be the hardest part, but I was wrong. The hardest part was still to come. I thought leaving her behind would bring me peace, that the storm inside me would settle once I closed the door on our life. But it didn't. Every step I took away from that apartment, I carried her with me. The sound of her sobs, the memory of her eyes when I told her it was over, the weight of 12 years of trust crumbling in an instant. For weeks I drifted like a ghost through the city. I stayed in hotels, then in a small rented room above a bar, trying to lose myself in noise and strangers' conversations. But no matter how far I went, her shadow followed me. The world kept spinning, people kept laughing, and I kept sinking into the wreckage of what she had done. Then one evening, just as the sun bled out over the horizon, she called. Her number lit up my phone, and my hand trembled as I answered. I need to see you, she said, her voice raw as though she'd been crying for days. I almost hung up, but something inside me, whether it was weakness, hope, or masochism, told me to go. We met at the old park near the river, the place where we'd once spent endless nights talking about dreams and futures. Now, the air between us was thick with everything unsaid. She looked smaller somehow, fragile. Her hair was tangled, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. For a moment I almost pitied her. I'm sick, she said quietly, her hands twisting together. The hospital visits, they weren't all lies. I was there too, but not for my sister, for me. Her words struck me like lightning. I stared at her, uncomprehending. I found out months ago, she went on. I tried to hide it. I didn't want you to see me weak. And then, I don't know, I lost myself. I made mistakes I can't take back. The betrayal and the confession tangled inside me until I didn't know which wound hurt more. Part of me wanted to scream at her again, to remind her that while she was sick, she was also destroying us. Another part of me, the part that still loved her despite everything, wanted to reach out and hold her, to protect her from the very thing tearing her apart. What kind of sickness? I asked finally, my voice rough. She told me, and as the words left her lips, my knees nearly buckled. It wasn't something minor, something to brush aside. It was the kind of diagnosis that changes everything, the kind that explains desperation, recklessness, and fear. Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time in months they were real. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she whispered. I couldn't keep lying anymore. Not about this." I turned away, staring at the river's dark surface. My mind was a storm, grief, anger, pity, love, all colliding. "I don't know what you want from me," I said. "I don't want anything," she replied. "I just needed you to know, and if this is goodbye, then at least it's honest." The honesty cut deeper than the lies ever did. We stood there in silence, the night pressing down on us, until at last she turned to go. I watched her walk away, her figure shrinking against the glow of the streetlights, and I realized something I hadn't understood until that moment. Betrayal and love can live in the same heart, fighting for space, suffocating each other. And sometimes the cruelest part isn't losing the person, it's knowing that even after everything, a piece of you still wants them back. I never called her again. Weeks later, I heard through a mutual friend that she had left the city. Some said she went back to her family. Others whispered she was in treatment. I never found out for sure. And maybe that's for the best. Because the truth is, if I saw her again, I don't know whether I'd curse her or kiss her, whether I'd walk away or collapse into her arms. All I know is this: she was both my greatest love and my greatest wound, and I will carry her like a scar that never fades for the rest of my life.